Hey, this is Caleb, part of the Narrate team. This week is part 2 of a series called Samuel. Adam provokes a conversation about finding purpose and pain. And then he asks the question of, once found, why is purpose so easily lost?
Really, last week what we did is we asked one question. And it was a question that I suppose is fraught with all kinds of difficulty, but if we can just kind of work through that a little bit. The question that we asked last week was, what if there's purpose to your pain? And yeah, that can sound trite and simplistic, and it even tends towards spiritualizing things, and that's not our goal at all. But really what we were saying is what if by delving into your pain, you can find your purpose? You know, the reality is we live in a culture that loves to talk about purpose, and rightly so. Psychology and the text makes it very, very clear that a person who lacks purpose is sure to be very, very miserable at the very least. And so many of us, maybe for you, probably all of us have read a book or been to a conference or heard some kind of rousing talk where the idea was like, if you could do anything, what would you do? If failure was no option, like what would you do? If money was no issue, like what would you do? And in those moments, sometimes in middle school, sometimes in high school, sometimes in college, sometimes much later in life, we have this moment and we hear those invitations, and it's the motivation, it's the kick that we need to step out into the world and take risk and seize our divine moment and make sure that we live a life that matters. And those are very, very important times. Some of you are probably weeks or months or years into such a moment. But what we said last week is that sometimes, much like our culture struggles to place pain and suffering, sometimes what happens is the bottom falls out of life. I mean, sometimes you dreaming a dream involves like wishing you didn't have cancer. Sometimes you get the diagnosis. Sometimes the marriage fails. Sometimes you take all the risk in business and it doesn't work. Sometimes you move to a place and it proves to be a disaster. Like sometimes you step out there, and what happens is the bottom falls out, and suddenly you realize that you're just racked with pain. You look in the mirror and you see a person with an addiction. And I think what we have a hard time placing in our culture, I know I do personally, is going, okay, so what do we do with this? And really what we did last week is used Hannah, who is Samuel's mom, used her story to step out into this conversation of, wait a minute, well, what if sometimes you find your purpose not through those kind of motivational moments, though they have their place. Sometimes you find your purpose because of the pain. Really, we ended last week by saying, what if we need you to step into it, to pay attention to it, to get well? What if we need to stop pushing, we need to push away the Christianese and the fake smiles and the everything's beautiful and everything's perfect and that terrible song from the Lego movie? And what if sometimes we just need to recognize like pain has a role, and we're going to embrace that. So that was last week and where we started last week and really where we ended last week. This morning I want to ask what I think, especially if you're cynical like me, and I know lots of you are much more cynical than I am and even much, much, much more intelligent. And so I think there's the next question, and the next question is actually the more troublesome question, and it's where we're going to get to this morning. But before we do, I just want to take a moment to go like, hey, I couldn't mean more sincerely that the goal on Sunday is to start conversations, not finish them. I can't think of a subject where I deserve to get the last word on the subject. Just not the intention of this place. The intention of this place is to kick into gear conversations between you and your spouse and you and your friends and you and God, however you understand him at this point in your journey. It's to kick into conversations where you begin to do the work of this stuff. And this morning's question, I think this is more true of that than any question we've asked in a while. And actually, to that end, we're getting better about resourcing that, so it's not just an idea, but we can help those conversations happen. So some of you discovered this I think it was late August, we started putting on the heat registers these mind map things, we call them. For years, we've been trying to figure out notes pages, and some of you have been like, hey, could we get a notes page? And I just went like, I don't know what a note, this never really fit our culture. And there's that game you play, like you fill in the blank, and it's kind of like Jeopardy. Like everyone's not really listening to the sermon. They're just trying to figure out like what word's going to go in that blank. And that never really felt like all that helpful. And so my friend Jim said to me one time, like, Adam, just give us your mind map. And I was like, psh. I had this moment because in my office I got these giant whiteboards and I mind map my sermons, and so that's what we started doing. And some of you, you've been using those. We can see that, and that's flattering. This week what we've added are, in this case, this week it's 6 days worth of readings. Not big chunks of Scripture, but the design is to help you take the conversation further in the Scriptures, because some of you would love to read from the Scriptures, and you're like, I don't even know where I would start. I mean, this is a big book. And so some of you, or maybe some of you, the opposite's true, and you're so familiar that when you open the Bible, you don't even read words, you just see underlines and highlights and things that you've done for the last 30 years. And so what we've done is we put on the back of those just readings that are designed kind of to push you into similar directions as this morning's content, and hopefully that'll create some good, we call it chair time, but just some time in your day to start in the morning by reflecting for 15 minutes and reading, so that's there. The other thing that's there are some questions on the back, and that's not because, well, first of all, I don't think they're very good questions, they're just questions, and the design of those is all of the things I already said between you and God, but also to create conversation between you and your spouse, or you and your kids, or as a family, or maybe there's someone that you informally grab coffee or lunch or a beer with every once in a while, and you could use them in that context. Maybe you're someone there's these few couples, and you'd love to do small groups, but you do this like, Adam hates small groups. We can't do small groups. He'll ban us from Narrate. Can I just set the record straight? Like, I'm not anti-small groups. We're not anti-small groups. I'm anti-organizing your small groups for you, because that to me feels like arranged marriage. And that doesn't typically go all that well. Like, to me, to take a bunch of couples who have good intentions and don't know each other and go, here, be pen pals, it just gets creepy. And then you don't like each other. And then you don't know if you're even a Christian anymore. And so I'm just saying, like, Come serve with us, fill Easter eggs, like play on the band, be a part of the ushering team, all those things, meet people, and then take those questions. So there we go. Could I get off that soapbox? Just repeat after me. Adam's not anti-small groups. No, you don't have to do that. So there's that resource. And all that is to get at this question, because I think this question and even my suggestions at answers are full of difficulties and contradictions. And so here we go. Here's what I think we have to dive into, though. Simply this: once found, why is purpose so easily lost? You ever thought of that? Like going to the conference or going to the convention or laying out your business plan. Like every company has a mission statement, and it's in a drawer somewhere on a plaque somewhere. Like we have the boss comes back from that conference. He's like, hey, here's our purpose. And you go, whatever, we'll do the same thing a week from now that we've always done. Like finding purpose, that's the easy part, right? Going to the therapist and beginning to understand, like, oh man, here's why I have all this pain, and I can use this pain, and I can serve young girls with my pain. And then suddenly life happens. And you got a kid with dirty diapers and a meal that needs to be cooked and all kinds of things. And do you ever just notice, like, finding it easy, living it, that's where the work starts. You know, I was talking to my friend Jack this week. We had lunch, and some of you remember a couple weeks ago we showed a video of Jack. Jack's a professor at Carroll who takes students all over the world and serves people, and we love Jack because he goes all over the world and we stay here and pray. At least that's what I like. Jack, he's salt of the earth, one of the greatest people I've ever known. And I was talking to him this week about his trip to Haiti. He was telling me they landed in Port-au-Prince. They had 100 miles to drive from Port-au-Prince. Haiti, by the way, is statistically the second poorest country on the planet. They had 100 miles to drive where they would actually do their work. That drive took them 11 hours. Yeah, you just do the math, right? Like, that's put your car in idle and drive to Livingston. Sounds fun, right? Except for it's not over a paved road. Like the reason you're going 10 miles an hour is because you're on a bucking bronco for 11 straight hours. Once they got there were several nights where they didn't have food to eat. They had breakfast, but not lunch or dinner. There was oftentimes, he said, there was no electricity in the evenings. I was like, what do you do when there's no electricity? He said, it's just pitch black. What do you do in the middle of Haiti when it's pitch black at 6 o'clock at night or whatever it was? He said, we'd get out the guitar and we would sing songs. I thought, that's not what I do at 6 o'clock in the night when it's pitch black. I'd be in the fetal position begging for mommy. So part of what I love about Jack is he's human. And part of what he was saying to me over lunch is like, I don't know if I'm going back to Haiti, Adam. Like, I think I can serve people here for very logical reasons. And I just had this privilege of sitting across the table from this hero who's also real and going, that was exhausting and horrifying, and 48 hours in airports to get back to Helena. That's like communist Russia for 2 days, right? I mean, just horrible, horrible stuff. And as he was talking about all that, then he started talking about, like, now he's walking the halls at Carroll and students are going like, hey, next time you go to Haiti, I'm in. And he's going, what do you mean next time I go to Haiti? And he's having these interactions with students after Haiti. And if you know Jack, you know he's got decades of relationships with students. You can't go anywhere with Jack without somebody, whether he's a cook at the Windbag or somebody somewhere, going, hey, Jack, who's that? Oh, he was a student of mine. And they would do anything for Jack. And as we were having this conversation, I hate to be the guy who's like, hey, I preached that sermon last week. But it's like, Jack, wait, do you see what's happening here? Like, you're trying to figure out why the pain, and is the pain worth it anymore? And you've got grandkids to serve. And in apparent disconnected fashion, you're saying, I've got these relationships with students, and I wouldn't trade anything in the world for them. And I had the privilege of going, hey, Jack, there's purpose to the pain. And you can't get rid of one and still have the other. And yet there's the human component of going, okay, but by Wednesday of my time in Haiti, I don't know what my purpose is anymore. It's just be home with wife and kids. Like, you ever notice that you just forget? Got to visit a couple this week who had their first baby. And my wife's an OB nurse, and so her and the mom like nerded out on all these gross facts, and they're talking, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, la, 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 trying, and I'm talking to the dad like, hey, so how about the NCAA tournament? And I heard her say, like, there was this point where the pain was such. I don't know the pain. I've not had the pain. I'm grateful for not having had the pain. But there's this point where she's like, I'm just going like, I am never doing this again. Never doing this again. One child, I'm giving birth to one child. This is horrible. And then just a few minutes later, she's describing her brand new son on her chest. And she's going, oh man, this was awesome. And I overheard as I was talking to the dad, she's going like, I could do this like another time, or maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times, maybe 5 times. And then the dad's going like, 5 times? What are you talking about here? There's the pain and there's the purpose, and they're linked. And I guess the conversation that I feel like we have to have, because listen, I know a lot of you guys. You're part of this movement because purpose is in your blood. And yet so is having to cook dinner and pay bills and go through life, and you just lose it. And that's where I'm excited about some of the characters in Samuel, because I think they can help us mightily here. And the irony is the characters that we're going to look at this morning are the villains in the story. They're these guys, we'll just refer to them as Eli's sons. And if you're not familiar with the story, Eli was the priest of Israel at the time. Israel didn't have a temple in Jerusalem. They had a tent in Shiloh. The people came there to worship. The idea was that God provided these priests. Eli was the head one. By this time, he's kind of a figurehead, doesn't really do much. He just kind of sits around and looks pretty. And his sons they're the doers. They're the workers. You know, they're the ones actually carrying out the tasks. And the text says some very distinct things about these guys. These are the heir apparents. You can answer it and tell them we're talking about Eli. Verse 12 says this. Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. Now, I've had some people say some terrible things about me, I'm sure, even sometimes to my face. Scoundrels? Actually, the word shows up in other places in the Bible, plagues. Like, I know you've been mad at your husband, but you've never accused him of having the same value as a plague. Like, no good, all bad, nothing good comes from that. Unless you think the text is just leveraging name-calling without rationale, what follows is some rationale. The first thing it tells us is that these guys were thieves. They were embezzlers. See, the worship system at this time was you brought your sheep, and you actually didn't just bring any sheep. You brought your best sheep, something we're going to talk more about next week with Kate as we talk about music and why we sing and worship and all those things. But you bring your sheep, and the idea was once the sheep was being offered, once it was being sacrificed, once it was being cooked, burnt up for God, the priest got to come along, and the priest got to stick a fork in it, not a pun, like you got to stick a fork in it, and whatever meat came with the fork became your provision for the future. Like for that day, the priest, that's what they got to eat. So I suppose not unlike offerings here, like the staff's salaries are paid from what goes in those buckets. We don't have a money tree anywhere. There's not a grant. Like that's the way the system worked. And so the priests, what they decided was they didn't want cooked meat. They didn't want half-cooked meat. They wanted the meat before it was cooked. Now, you can only speculate what the advantage would be of having it before it's cooked versus while it's cooked. And I have to think that if they wanted it before it was cooked and they wanted to not just stick a fork in the pot and see what came out, I have to wonder if they were also wanting the best part of the meat. Like if they're going to go that far, what's to keep them from saying, no, we want the reserved pieces of the animal. And some of the worshipers, they weren't keen on it. They understood the way it was supposed to work, and it came fist to blows, so to speak. It became a fight because they would stick up for themselves, these people, and the priests and their attendants would just take it anyway. The text, someone's sitting on their phone. The text says this. This sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. So you go, okay, well, that's bad. It gets worse. The other thing the text tells us is that Eli's, his sons, they were guilty of sexual abuse. They had all this position and all this power and all these robes and all this trust and all this influence, and they were using it to coerce women for sexual favors. Now, I know it's hard to imagine men with a lot of power using that power to coerce women for sexual favors, but you just kind of have to imagine a world when that happened. And this is terrible, obviously. And especially it's terrible because the world in which the Jewish people were living were surrounded by sexual practice, that the temple and worship was the same thing. And I know it's easy to read the Bible and go, that's barbaric. But to be fair to the text, every time you do that, you have to go, that's barbaric, but relative to the surrounding culture, it was progressive. See, other cultures, the way they worshiped was with the priests, they got anything they wanted sexually. In fact, one of the major forms of worship was sexual acts. And so you and your wife, you may go worship, and part of her worship was to have sex with the priest. And they've stepped right back into this. And it's gross. The text says, now Eli was very old. Not sure why we had to clarify that. He heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And I don't know about you, but here's where I so value that 15 minutes of chair time and just starting the day by slowing down and going, oh yeah, I was an idiot here, here, and here, and thanks God for your grace. But a couple months ago, as I was reading through 1 Samuel, I happened upon this story, and my first inclination was like, how does that happen? How do a couple priests entrusted with so much, given so much power, how does that happen? And yet some of you who maybe work in law enforcement or in therapy, maybe you work with students who are abused, you're already a step ahead of me because you go, how does it happen? It happens. And quickly for me, what happened in the course of about 15 minutes was the camera lens flipped a little bit, and you quickly start going, wait a minute. Is this a story about priests who got off the mark? Or is this a story about humanity who so easily forgets? Like, do you read about the priests in order to demonize them and ridicule them and say, oh, those scoundrels, look at what they're capable of? Or do you read the story of the priests and go, oh man, I started this business and I was just going to be the most servant-hearted business leader in all the town and the staff was going to love it. And now it's about me. And I became a teacher and it was all about serving these kids and now I hate the kids. And listen, I understand there's all kinds of tricky conversations here as we talk about profitability and serving people and all those things. But I think we can all probably appreciate starting down a path where the goal was to serve people and arriving at a place where you had lots of power and it was about you. You know, I heard a story recently about it was in a podcast interview with a guy named Simon Sinek who just wrote a book called Leaders Eat Last. Didn't know that in the Marine culture, Marines, it's not written in their code of conduct, but the lowest ranked people get in the chow line first. And so he wrote a book about this whole concept of leaders eat last. But he said he was about a half-ish way into the book and he decided he was done. He was going to quit. It wasn't good enough. He'd already taken upfront money from the publisher. He was kind of panicking. He'd told people this was coming out. There'd been public kind of declarations that this thing was coming out. And so in the midst of his panic, he went for a walk. And his whole point of the walk was to strategize, how am I going to get out of this? He figured out how he could repay the money. He figured out how he could offer some condolences to the public. He figured out how long it was going to take his reputation to recover. He got back home and kind of on a whim, he called a good friend just because he sensed he should. His friend was a retired Air Force Special Ops helicopter pilot. He flew helicopters, they've been retired since, called the Pavlo. They take very powerful soldiers into very dangerous places. And his friend, who used to fly these things, began to tell him of his last mission in Afghanistan. He said, one of the last assignments that I was given, it was undoubtedly a suicide mission. He said the orders came, there were several helicopters, dozens of men involved. The orders came in, and we knew that there's only one outcome of this mission, and that was that we all die. He went on to explain that it wasn't even the type of mission where you go like, okay, but there will be sacrifice, good things happening from our sacrifice. He said, no, this was like terrible mission, the type of mission like Black Hawk Down kind of stuff where we knew we were all toast and no good would come from it. He said they went out. And in their nervousness and nervous energy, they went out to the tarmac and they were preparing their helicopters. They were standing around wondering what they were going to do. And he was kind of the go-to guy. And one of the other pilots who would be his wingman in this mission, he finally looked at him and he said, "What do we do?" And the anxiety was obvious. "What do you do? What do we do?" He said. Do we refuse to fly?" And this man took a deep breath and he looked at his buddy and he said, "I'll tell you what we do. We fly. Because that's what we signed up for. And so we fly." Now, the mission was canceled, and the guy's alive to tell the story. But the more time I spend with the sons of Eli, the more I think, I don't know that I should be amazed by people who deviate. I shouldn't know that I should be amazed by people who abuse their power. Maybe I should be amazed by people who stay on target. That's what's amazing. You and I, finding a mission, finding something to give our life to, piece of cake, staying the course. Like he's 18 months and still not potty trained, and you're going like, why did we do this? That's the hard part, right? Read a story recently about a guy named Witold Pilecki. It's spelled with a W, but because I know how to speak Russian, I don't. Witold Pilecki was born in 1901 in Russia. And they say that had he heard those words, he would have cringed, because Witold was a proud Polish man whose family was involved in the uprising in Poland in 1860, uprisings designed to give Poland independence. And because of those uprisings, all the powerful, influential, kind of go-get-em families were moved into Russia as punishment. So he was born there, grew up there, maintained strong ties to the Polish identity, joined what would be the equivalent of the Boy Scouts, which was an illegal Polish group of young men who were continued to taught to think about Polish independence. As World War I kicked into gear, it became apparent this was their chance to get independence. Witold dropped out of high school and as a teenager joined a militia, kind of guerrilla group within Poland, fought for Polish independence. After World War I was over, Poland was granted its independence. Witold rejoined high school. He re-enrolled in high school. He eventually graduated from a military academy. And from there, life happened fast. He was married. He had 2 kids. He inherited the family estate from Belarus. And then World War II happened. And he was a lieutenant in the army. And some of you will remember Poland, they collapsed almost immediately. Witold stayed put, though. He joined another group of Christian militiamen who were like hell-bent, so to speak, on making sure that Poland was once again its own country. They fought for their independence illegally, kind of sabotage style. And it was then that they discovered that there was this camp that no one had ever heard of called Auschwitz. And they were horrified. They initially assumed, like, great, this means the Allies are going to show up quick. And of course, they learned what we all know, that the Allies either knew and weren't doing anything about it or didn't know. And so this small militia of men, they decided they would liberate Auschwitz. So in 1941, I believe it was, Witold kissed his wife and 2 kids goodbye, and with falsified papers in his pocket, purposely walked into a German roadblock. His design was to get arrested, thrown into Auschwitz, and then he had a series of commissions, a series of objectives that he needed to accomplish so that he could get the necessary information so that his kin, so that his guys could come liberate Auschwitz. He spent 947 days in Auschwitz. The journals that were eventually captured of his speak of his experiencing all the horrors of Auschwitz. The dehumanizing medical experiments, the starvation, the abuse, the droves of people going into the gas chambers. And on the 948th day, Witold escaped, but only after completing every task given him by those men. Now, if here I told you that Witold at that point decided he was going to put his feet up and wait for the war to end, none of us would blame him. He didn't. He found a British battalion and joined them and continued to fight the Germans. Eventually, of course, the Allies won the war, and Witold, along with all of his Polish friends, quickly discovered that the war was over for most people, but it wasn't over for Poland. Their enemy immediately became Soviet Russia. He once again joined another militia. He was eventually arrested in the Battle of Warsaw, was sentenced to 3 life counts, and was executed in Soviet Russia. And they have his final words, and they say something basically they say, I'm going to die, and that's as it should be. because this is what my life is for Poland. Now, I know there's some sentimentalism there, but when I contrast that with Eli, I just can't help but think Eli's the norm. His son's story, that's what's typical. It's Vitold. It's the Air Force pilot. It's guys like Jack. It's not that they don't feel fear. It's that they don't allow it to control them. It's not that they don't ever get out of focus. It's that they get back in focus. That's what's rare. So let me ask you. It's not about, let me ask you, is it about the mission? Is it about the purpose? Or is it about remembering it? Like, when did you first come to the realization that life works best when it's not about you? I bet you you've had that moment. See, what strikes me is that what Eli's sons forgot and what Vitold remembered, they're the same thing, aren't they? They're the exact same thing. One group of guys forgot that moment in their youth where they went, wait, you mean to tell me that we get to serve God and people in this way? Sign me up. Another group of guys went, okay, I'm going to keep returning. We fly because that's what we signed up for. You know, Jesus, he seems to be well aware of how easy it was to get pulled off mission. The temptations are one great example of that. And he even talked to his guys, like, guys, I know you're having these big celebrations and you've all like tattooed my name on your arm. I'm telling you, it's trickier than that. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. So there's this sense where Jesus goes, whoa. Staying on course. That's the hard part. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? What can anyone give in exchange for their soul? What's he saying there? He's telling the story of Vitold. How easy it is to exchange your purpose for something that is trivial. And he goes on in Matthew 20, he says, Jesus called them together. Like his guys had an argument about who gets to sit on the throne and who gets to wear the hat. And he says, hey, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. See, I know I'm moving fast here, but here's simply my point. Whatever the purpose is, whatever it is, I'll bet you at the core of it is a passion to serve people, is a passion to put people before yourself. And Jesus goes, that'll be tough. You know, I found myself this week wondering, and this is thin ice, but I kind of like it there sometimes, at least intellectually. I found myself wondering this week, I wonder if the reason why our culture, and oftentimes us, especially those of us who've sat around church for a long time, I wonder if part of the reason it becomes so easy to discount Jesus is because his message is so familiar. Now, we could argue about whether or not historically he was the first one to bring it to the table. That's not my point. But if you want to hear a rousing message about go give your life to others, you don't necessarily need Jesus for that. And I wonder if part of the reason, especially those of you raised in evangelical context, part of your disillusionment is, wait a minute, Jesus doesn't have a monopoly on that message. We can get that message from lots of places. And I found myself this week going, you could be right. And I wonder, was Jesus' message, like, did he claim he's the only one who had it? Or did he claim that with him you could do it in a way that you otherwise couldn't? You know, it strikes me that in John 15, Jesus was very clear with his guys. He knew it was coming. He knew how hard it was going to be. And he said to them, hey, I'm the vine. You're the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Now, those are big words. But I'm starting to think Jesus' claim of the importance of living a life that was about others, that wasn't all that unique. What was, hey, you live with me. You stay close to me. You check in with me on a daily basis. I can keep you on mission. There's something he says just a little bit earlier than this that it just irks me every time I read it because it seems so trite, but I believe it because he said it. It says this, very truly I tell you, Whoever believes in me will do the works I've been doing, and they'll do even greater things than these because I'm going to the Father. See, Jesus' message, I don't think he was claiming like, hey, I've got a whole brand new idea. No one's ever thought of it. Serve people. I think what made him unique was he's going, hey, because of the cross, because of the resurrection, because of the release of the Holy Spirit into your lives, because of what it means to live with God, you can do it. You know, there's lots of ways to attempt at going after life. I guess I follow Jesus because I believe that with him, it's just a lot more doable. With him, we have power that we don't have otherwise. With his Holy Spirit working through us, we have capabilities that we didn't have before he was in us. Listen, I don't know what your trade is. I don't know what your profession is. I don't know where it is where you go, here's my call to serve people. But it strikes me that Jesus' invitation is, hey, let me join you in that. And I'll keep you on point. Yeah, you'll deviate, but I'll nudge you back. You know, this morning, I just want to end by giving you a chance to reflect and pray. And so this will be different if you're a regular in this culture. But I sincerely just want you to kind of, let's just pray. Everyone close their eyes and just talk to God about this stuff. Many of you follow Jesus. And I know how busy life is, and so I'm just, talk to God about what it is you're thinking. This is private. This is you. This is maybe, hopefully not, but the only 2 minutes of this that you'll get for a while. And as those of you who follow Jesus are praying and talking to God, I want to talk to those of you with heads bowed and eyes closed who don't follow Jesus. And invariably, he's a bit of an enigma to you, and I get that. And maybe you've been toying with following him for months, maybe even years. This morning I want to give you a chance to start following him. My interest isn't guaranteeing you heaven when you die. That comes with him. It's not his or my primary point right now. Maybe for the first time you're going, yeah, I'm done doing life alone. Maybe for the first time you're ready to commit yourself to be a follower of his. You don't even have to call yourself a Christian. Just a follower of his. Listen, I don't want to embarrass you. I just, like, if there's something happening in you, I want to give you a chance to capitalize on that. Tell him that. Tell him you've known all the answers, but you haven't had the power to do it. When you're trusting him to help you do it. And again, listen, that this is private. This is about you. But if you're someone who for the very first time in your life is going, Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to connect with you on that. I'm not going to point you out. You have the rest of your life to be bold for Jesus, but I do just want to get your eyes, celebrate with you. So if that's you and you're going, I'm choosing to follow Jesus for the first right now, in the privacy of this moment, will you just look up at me, maybe even slip a hand in the air so that I can see you? If you're doing that, you could do that now. You're following Jesus. Lord Jesus, thanks, God, that you don't call us to the work that you have, to the relationships that you have, to the arduous tasks of raising kids and loving a spouse and serving our community. That you're not just an idea guy, you're not just a pomp guy, you're not just a rah-rah guy, but God, that you've drawn near. And that you've said you'll do it with us. God, thanks for the story of Eli. Thanks for the story of the Pharisees, that we see them like a mirror, not a window. Knowing it's our story, not just theirs. God, would you help us see opportunities and have the courage to seize them? We love you, Jesus. Amen.
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.